Well, hello, y'all. Glad to have you back. Have you thought about our question? We were talking about a hypothetical Genesis Garden of Eden account in which Adam and Eve were not kicked out of the garden. There was never any curse. They didn't have to work to get anything. Food just spontaneously happened on trees. It grew on trees. Would there be any basis for the study of economics as we have defined it under that scenario? And at this point, although I can't take a vote of hands here, some students at least would say, well, no, because there's no scarcity. If there's no scarcity, you can't have human action under scarcity if you don't have scarcity. And in that hypothetical Garden of Eden, there's no scarcity. There's no end to the amount of food. There's no end to the things that they can do, the number of tree houses they can build, the number of whatever it is they want to do. They're never going to run out of food. And I would want to counter that. I'd want to say, actually, there would be a scientific basis for the study of economics, even under the most scarcity-free external environment that I can possibly imagine. And I'm sure you're saying, okay, dig yourself out of this one. How are you going to say there's still scarcity in that kind of Garden of Eden? Well, I remember reading a book and watching a Walt Disney movie called Swiss Family Robinson. And Swiss Family Robinson, they were shipwrecked on this South Pacific island, and they were having lots of fun. And it was kind of a Garden of Eden sort of scenario, and they built tree houses, and they had all sorts of fun. And the guys liked to race the zebras, and they did all sorts of fun things, swimming in the lagoons and things. And I thought, that would be fun. If I was in this hypothetical Garden of Eden, if I was Adam, what would I like to do? And I'm thinking, well, mountain climbing would be fun. Racing zebras, okay, that'd be good for grins and giggles. But what I would really like to do, what I would really enjoy doing, and that would be dolphin surfing. I would like to surf. Who needs a surfboard if you have a dolphin? I would like to dolphin surf. So I'm never going to run out of food. I'm never going to run out of mountains to climb. I'm never going to run out of zebras to race. I'm never going to run out of waves to surf, and I'm never going to run out of dolphins that would like to play with me surfing through these waves on the back of dolphins. I'd also like to have my cherry pie, my peach pie, my apple pie. And am I ever going to run out of peaches or cherries or apples for all my pies? The answer is no. But I would still be a human being under the condition of scarcity, even in that most ideal of external environments. Because although I've got a big mouth, my mouth is not so big that I can have a full mouth of cherry pie and also have a full mouth of peach pie at the same time. Yes, I can dolphin surf, or I could zebra race, or I could climb mountains, but I can't do them all at the same time. In order for me to mountain climb, I have to give up dolphin surfing and zebra racing. So the scarcity is not out there. I'm not running out of peaches or apples or cherries. And I'm not running out of surf or mountains or zebras. But I am running out of something called me, because I am not infinite. I am finite. F-I-N-I-T-E. I'm not infinite. I'm finite. The world's only so big. It's big, but it's not infinitely big. It is a finite bigness. And so when we're talking about human action under scarcity, we're talking about not the problem, ultimately, of there's not enough stuff out there. I would still be under economic law and principles, even in an ideal Garden of Eden scenario, because the limitation is right here. I am finite. I can only do some things one at a time. So for me to dolphin surf, I have to give up mountain climbing. So since I can't do everything, I've got to make choices because I am scarce. The scarcity is right here with me. So I hope by that illustration, even in the most ideal external environment that I could possibly think of, and it was a variation, a hypothetical version of the Garden of Eden, I would argue that we still have the basis for economics, human action under scarcity, even in the most ideal environment. Now let's talk about, or review, actually, go back to the first academic economist. You already know the answer to this question. If I ask you who's the first academic economist, I'm talking about who is the first person who studied, wrote about, thought about economics. And if you say the word or the name Adam Smith, you would be correct. But what about that etymology of economics, which was household rulers? So I want to contrast the first academic economist who studied economics versus the first historical economist who did economics. If we go back to that book in the Bible, that first one, Genesis, in the beginning, we're talking about a guy named Abraham in there. His name was Abram. That was Abraham because he was father of many, and he had this, like a moving nation. He had these 318 soldiers that were in his household that he fed just to keep order and keep marauders out. And although his name was father of many in those times, as well as in American Indian times, in some other cultures, names mean something. They just are not like Bill or Ralph or Jane or Henrietta or something. They actually mean something. And his name meant father of many. If you ask him, how many sons you have, he'd say none. But you don't laugh in his face because he had too many fighting men that were trained with swords and arrows and all those sorts of things. But if he died because he didn't have many sons, then his whole estate would have gone to a fellow named Eleazar, who was the top dog slave of his house. He would have inherited everything. So when we're talking about historical economists, we're talking about people who were the household ruler, made the household law, not necessarily the household owners, but the household rulers. And Eleazar would be the economist. He would be an illustration of a historical economist because he made the household rules. He said, today we're going to butcher 3 sheep and we're going to give them to these fighting men's households over here, and you're going to take that flock of sheep and take them down there and sell some to a caravan, and you're going to take the goats over there and water them, and you're going to do this. Now Abraham owns it all, but he doesn't want to make those administrative decisions. He leaves it up to his household ruler, his economist. So if I was to ask you on a quiz, according to the lecture, Abraham was an ancient economist, you would say false. No. Eleazar was a household ruler. He would be an example of a historical economist. And if you follow that biblical countdown, you got Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob had a bunch of sons. The youngest one was Next to youngest was Joseph. The other brothers didn't like him because he was daddy's favorite. They're going to kill him, but they sold him off. In a bizarre set of circumstances, he winds up being the number 2 man in Egypt. Now again, we have an illustration of a historical economist in Joseph because he was a Hebrew and everybody else was Egyptian. And Egyptians, racism goes back a long time, and Egyptians don't even eat with Hebrews. And so, although Joseph ran the whole show economically in Egypt, how much of it did he own? Not that much. Maybe his household and his clothes and that sort of thing. The Pharaoh really owned it all, but he was Pharaoh's economist. So if you're looking for illustrations of historical economists, you can go back in biblical history and you can look at the illustration of Eleazar, or you could look at the illustration of, let's see, we said Joseph. You could probably go forward with Daniel too under the Phoenician Empire as well. We're going to stop there now that you know the difference between an academic economist, the first person to study economics, versus the first people in recorded history to actually do economics. Thank you.